answer and discussion to talk about Amendment 1. I did want to have a few opening remarks to let you know what I know about it, which is a lot more than I knew even a month ago. Does everyone know about Amendment 1? At least have heard about it, know pretty much what it's going to do, what it says?
Just a little bit.
Just a little bit. Well, let me read to you what the proposal on the ballot will say on May 8th. It says, oh, that's not it. No, I don't have it. Oh my gosh, where'd it go? Huh. Okay, I don't have the actual ballot language, I'm sorry. But it says something to the effect of the only legally recognized partnership in North Carolina will be a marriage between one man and one woman. Period. There's language in there about also no civil unions, no domestic partnerships. The only legally recognized partnership in the state of North Carolina would become a marriage between one man and one woman. And to be honest, we are the only state in the South that does not have a constitutional amendment that specifically bans same-sex marriage. But you notice what this one says. It doesn't say anything about same-sex marriage. They wanted to do that, and I think they've gone too far in this amendment, which is why I'm very comfortable and confident that we could actually defeat this thing. I think if an amendment proposal had actually been written to say same-sex marriages in North Carolina will not be legally recognized, we'd have a much harder time probably defeating that. Because polls show that the majority, whatever the poll is, the majority of polls show that people in North Carolina do not favor same-sex marriages yet. However, also the majority of the polls in North Carolina say that most North Carolinians do not favor taking rights away from people. This amendment, whether it is passed or defeated, does nothing to alter the status of same-sex couples in this state. Meaning, there are already 2 laws on the legislative books of our state that ban same-sex marriage. So this would do nothing for that. So a lot of the proponents originally, and they're still saying that, well, you have to vote for this amendment, otherwise gays will start to marry. End of civilization. Simply not true. A complete lie. If this were to pass, it simply says nothing more for same-sex couples than what already exists. If you're a same-sex couple, you cannot get married in North Carolina today. You can't tomorrow, you can't on May 9th, no matter what happens to this amendment. What this amendment, if passed, will do is make any sort of domestic partnership or civil union or any benefits that are given to those domestic partnerships or civil unions that people enter into that's not a marriage, null and void. So what's the common percentage that people usually throw around to say X percent of the population is gay? 10? Okay. So actually, if this were to pass, it's actually going to, 90% of the people it affects are going to be same-sex couples. Because it's going to say if you're not in a legal marriage, marriage is the key thing. It really doesn't have a lot to do anymore about same-sex couples marrying, because it doesn't say anything about that. What it says is we will only recognize marriage as the legal union in this state. So if you are in a civil partnership that's not marriage, if you're in a domestic partnership or you have a civil union or you're just living together, your rights go away.
Yeah, so if you're living together as partners and you're on the other person's insurance at their work,
exactly.
You don't get it anymore?
And that's questionable. When the General Assembly passed this resolution to go on to the ballot, there's a second sentence that they passed that's not going to be on the ballot. And the second sentence, I wish I had it, but I'll have to find it while we're talking. The second sentence says something very legalese. You know, that two or more private parties can enter into a contractual relationship and be able to have certain rights that blah, blah. I mean, it's very legalistic. And that was supposedly added in to appease businesses that say, well, I give domestic partnership benefits to my business. Will I no longer be allowed to do that? Well, this says now 2 private parties can enter into such agreement and it'll be okay. However, It doesn't say if those private parties are individuals. It doesn't say if the private parties can be a corporation. We don't know. And it's not on the ballot. What it specifically doesn't do is say governments can. So if you're living in, we don't have it here in Wilmington, but counties or cities that give domestic partnership benefits, like Charlotte, a lot of counties that give, they, as a government, gone. So if someone's in the, say, lives in Charlotte, our friends in Charlotte, and they have a child and someone works for the county or the city and they're getting health insurance for their child, that's not their legal child, gone. The government will no longer be able to do that. And that's not just same-sex couples. There's lots of people don't get married for lots of reasons. I'm going to pass out one sheet here. There's an organization called Protecting All North Carolina Families that's been doing a lot of work. And this gives you a pretty quick graphical talking points and things that will happen with this amendment. So first, I don't know a whole lot of the history or how the legislature voted or finally got this voted on, except to say that for the past 8 years, I believe, this amendment proposal has been brought up in the House by House Republicans.
It never got this far.
But it never got this far. It was always kept in committee. And so it never really got voted on in the full House. Well, last year that changed. When the Republicans took over both chambers of the North Carolina Assembly, this was quickly passed and put onto the ballot for the first time. How did that happen? Well, it lingered in a committee for a long time, a year, with a name something like the Clean Water, I have this name wrong, but it's something like the Clean Water Act of something something county. Boring. Nobody read it, nobody ever looked at it, and it stayed with that name in a committee, meaning general House people weren't looking at it yet. All the way up until a Sunday night it was changed to the Defense of Marriage, Same-Sex Act, and Monday morning it was brought to the House floor for a vote, half hour of discussion, passed. Nobody knew about it. There was no discussion about it. There was no public discussion about it. The next day it was brought to the Senate, passed. No discussion whatsoever. No one just, it was trickery, pure trickery, how this was passed. Pure politics, let's say. So that's why it's on our ballot this year. It's so poorly written and was so ill-conceived that it does so much harm, it will do so much harm if passed, that I don't think a lot of people who even voted for it realize. As a matter of fact, you can go online to this Protect All North Carolina, or Protect All Families, and read quotes from even some of the Republican legislators who voted for this, who said, had I known, I wouldn't have voted for this. But they were ill-informed. And it sounded good. So should marriage be restricted to one man and one woman? Yes, vote for it. Well, it's so poorly written. Even the Speaker of our House, I forget his name, but the North Carolina House, who was a proponent of this bill. Matter of fact, Tom Goolsbee was the man who kept introducing it year after year. The Speaker of the House came out a few weeks ago and publicly said, it doesn't matter because in 20 years this will be voted down and everything will be the way it should, so, basically this doesn't matter. And that's one of those times when I really want to punch someone. And say, really, it doesn't matter? So we're for 20 more years, because you're too chicken to take this off, that we still have to have discrimination, that we still have to send a message to our children that they're hated and not regular people and they should continue to commit suicide or run away? So, wash your hands of it, Speaker. Oh, 20 years from now somebody else will clean up the mess that I've helped make. But he's even saying this shouldn't be done. So there's a whole lot of people who are saying this shouldn't be done. But the way it reads on the ballot, unless people are educated about it, they might vote for it. Should the only recognized legal union in the state of North Carolina be a marriage between one man and one woman? Now, if you're just run-of-the-mill, not MCC, not into politics, think you don't know any gay people, you might say, well, yeah, okay. But then you don't know what's really happening. Because it's not about same-sex marriage. They wanted it to be, but they actually made it about everybody by stripping rights away from anyone who's not married. Let's take elderly, that's on the list. A lot of elderly people choose not to get married for a second time. Why? They might be living off a pension from their first spouse that they would lose if they were to marry. Lots of other benefits that they might have from being that single person from their first marriage they would lose if they got married, so they choose not to marry. They don't have any rights if this were to happen. They're not married. So they wouldn't have any right for visitations, they wouldn't have any rights for anything that's given to married couples, even if they were in a civil union or a domestic partnership, which a lot register for, so they can have some sort of semblance of being together. None of that would be recognized. They wouldn't be able to visit each other in the hospital. All those legal hoops that people have to jump through in order to say, this is the person who has, the right to make life decisions about me, and this is what's going to happen to my estate. We know all of that can be challenged by a blood relative swooping in who hasn't seen someone for 20 years and saying, I'm going to decide I'm family. Wiped out. Women will especially be hurt by this. Straight women will be hurt by this. All types of women will be hurt by this because women don't have the same rights as a lot of men in a relationship, and that's why a lot of women will choose to be married. Sorry to put it that way, but outside of love, the choice to get married versus just live together, there's benefits. It'll be lost, and men too, of course. One of the things that will happen mainly to women, I should say it happens to, obviously to both sexes, but mainly to women, we have domestic violence acts. Most states in this country have a domestic abuse act to protect people in a relationship who are beat up by their spouse or their partner or the person living with them. Well, that protection would go away. If you're not married, the Domestic Violence Act says, that, a couple, if you're a couple, and you abuse one or the other, then this kicks in. This will now say, well, you're not a couple unless you're married. So it wouldn't apply. Matter of fact, in the state of Ohio, I think it's close to 28 offenders have had their convictions of domestic abuse overturned. Convictions overturned, meaning they're in jail most of the time for abusing their girlfriend. And judges have said, well, you weren't married, and the act says you now have to be a married couple for this to apply, therefore your conviction's overturned, you're let out. Where do you go? Where's the first place you go? Back home to beat that person up again for putting you in jail. Do you understand how that happens? Yes.
What if a couple is divorced and they have children? Do those children lose their health coverage? What if a couple they're divorced and one parent is responsible for one child and one parent is responsible for the other child?
Right.
So what if child over here that's with father, can the mother carry health insurance for that child?
Well, this on the surface would say no. You're not married. But all these questions are also, we don't know the answer to. They're not tested in a court. All of this is going to go to court if this is passed. Immediately we'll go to court to decide things. And how are judges going to decide? Well, a judge is going to look at that and maybe, a straight couple who got divorced and has this set up, I bet judges will say fine. Any other sort of couple, I imagine they might say, well, no. But you don't know. The point is, we don't know. It hasn't been litigated. In other states that have similar constitutional amendments that are this restrictive, pieces are being done away with by judges for saying, well, this went too far. Well, then you come into a question about activist judges, right? And one of the reasons proponents of this amendment will say that we have to have this amendment, we must pass this, is because the two laws we have on the books right now banning same-sex unions in this state are so not legal or going to be struck down if you leave it up to the activist judges. Therefore, we need to amend the Constitution in order to make the laws we've already passed legal. A backdoor way of making something legal. Yes?
So if a lady's husband passed away 4 years ago and she's receiving his Social Security benefits, that's going to stop?
No, that wouldn't stop. But if she were to marry somebody else.
Okay.
I mean, a lot of times, older couples don't get remarried, so for the specific reason that they don't lose the benefits they're currently receiving from their previous partner. If they were to remarry, First you lose that, but if you don't remarry in order to keep that, you're not legally married. You're not a legal couple in the state of North Carolina if this were to pass. And a lot of that comes with health stuff, especially for elderly people. Think about that. You can't go visit the person in the hospital. You can't be the one to decide life or death situations, even with living wills. We've seen that happen where same-sex couples go through all this paperwork and legal mumbo-jumbo and tens of thousands of dollars, only to have a blood relative come in and say, I'm the one. Happened to Camilla Weber. Had it all legally, everything legal. And those relatives came in and did something different. Ignored everything.
That happened to me and Frank.
Happened to you?
We had all the legal papers done 10 years in advance, but they came in to get Frank's application. He said so. I said, can you wait a minute? They said, who are you? I said, I'm his partner. And the next question was, who are you?
Right.
But we had papers done. Most people don't have papers done.
Most people don't have, right.
So I said, if you wait a minute, I'll show you what they have. And then they were fine, but it had to be the legal things done.
Yeah.
So the gay couple has a child, and they're on the one who works with insurance. This may make it so that the child and the other partner don't have any right to that insurance.
It'll immediately make that true if they're receiving the insurance from a municipality.
Right.
Because governments will no longer be able to offer those. Can legal or can private institutions, that second sentence of the resolution, offer them, and in what way, and what does it mean? It's very convoluted. Or would a judge simply look, if something was brought and said, well, it says that we're allowed to have these legal contracts, a judge might look and say, but wait a minute, the voters didn't vote on that part. The only thing on the ballot is the first sentence. So can you have a resolution passed that has a lot more other information, send it to the voters for a vote, and you only vote on the first sentence, but then say, but everything else also applies that you didn't see or vote upon? I mean, I would hope a lot of judges would say, well, no.
But the thing is, you're up to a fight. You don't know what's
We don't know. And it'll be years in court, millions of dollars of litigation, with usually always minorities coming out on the bottom end. We live in a democratic society, ruled by the majority that has protections in place for minorities. And this takes that away. There's questions about, what do people of faith think about this? We might not even be all agreed in this room. We're certainly not as Christians or even anyone of spiritual faiths on the issue of same-sex marriage or homosexuality, which, again, this, 90% of the people this is going to affect are not same-sex couples. But if that's the concern for a lot of people, well, I don't want that. I don't approve of that. There are some I'm going to pass out. These are 2 sheets that didn't staple, but they're stacked. So make sure you.
That's the main thing we have to get across is that people know that it's not a gay issue.
Yeah.
It's not.
But most people think it is.
Yeah.
Most people think it is, and proponents, people who want this to pass, are certainly talking about it that way. Reverend Dr. William Barber is a reverend. He's also the president of the North Carolina chapter of the NAACP. The NAACP, both North Carolina chapter and our local New Hanover chapter, strongly oppose this amendment. Strongly oppose this amendment. And he wrote, a vote on the same-sex marriage amendment has nothing to do with your personal and religious opinion on same-sex marriage. But it has everything to do with whether or not you believe discrimination should be codified and legalized constitutionally. We should never seek to codify discrimination into the very heart and framework of our Constitution. I was at a panel earlier, or last week, and someone asked, well, this is called Amendment 1. Is this the first amendment ever to our Constitution? And actually, I didn't know the answer to that. No one did. I looked it up, and no, this is Amendment 1 of this election. There have been 22, I think, 21 or 22 amendments to the Constitution we are currently under. Not a single one ever restricted rights. The ones that dealt specifically with rights, whether it was corporations or bodies or people, always expanded them. Always. That's what Constitution should do. That's what people in charge of looking out for minorities should do. Expand rights to cover more people. This is the first one and only one to ever restrict rights. For a lot of people will fall under this. Remember, does everyone remember or know the story of Ruth in the Bible? Story of Ruth. Ruth is an Israelite, and she marries a man, and they go off to live in his homeland, and he dies, and all her sons die. So she's a widow in this foreign land, and she decides to go back to Israel, where she still might have a better chance of surviving. She's an unmarried widow, which they didn't last too long in ancient times. And one of her daughter-in-laws, that's Naomi, one of her daughter-in-laws named Ruth decides to go with her. And if you don't know the story, you might know the words Ruth spoke to Naomi, saying when they were about to go back. It's said at a lot of weddings, a lot of straight weddings, same-sex couple weddings. I will love you forever. Where you go, I will go. Your God will be my God. Your people will be my people. You are with me. That's spoken by two women. I mean, it's a great affirmation of love, so it doesn't matter if it's spoken by two women, and they weren't lesbians or anything, they're mother-in-law and daughter-in-law, but basically they were creating a new family. Ruth was saying, I will take care of you. I'm vowing to take care of you. You're an old widow going back to your homeland with no male, no husband, no sons to take care of you. She didn't stand a chance. Naomi says, I'll take care of you. Well, they came to North Carolina under this constitutional amendment, and Naomi had to go into the hospital, and Ruth wanted to go take care of her. They wouldn't let her in. Plain and simple. They're not blood relatives. It's not her daughter. They're not in a marriage. They didn't get married. So, no rights. All right. So, I mean, lots of people don't get married. Like Ruth and Naomi, who had no reason to get married, but decided to vow love and protection towards one another. Wiped out by this. It's pretty close to all I know. Unless there are questions. And I probably got some points wrong. So please read this information over before you go, but you can go. Not you specifically, sorry. Before you go, on the back of the first sheet, the one that was stapled, are a list of things you can do. Because it's all well and good enough if we individually know to vote against this thing. But that alone will not defeat this. Because, first of all, it's being done in a primary season. That's not, a lot of people don't go out to vote in primaries. Second, I think, depending on the region here, but, it's going to be on the back of a sheet. In some of the ballots, unless you go looking for this thing, you're not going to see it. It's not going to be, vote for all these people that are running for office and then this. They don't put them on the same page. It's going to be somewhere else. So you have to go look for it. You know who's going to go look for it? A lot. People that want it to pass. So the people that want it not to pass also have to go look for it. That means we need a lot of other people to go out there and vote against this thing who wouldn't normally think twice about this. I mean, I would admit a lot of people in my own family probably, if either wouldn't think twice about it or care about it, and might not vote for or against it, or if they happen to see it, actually vote for it. I mean, if this isn't your issue, which it should be everyone's issue, but if rights for all people, especially same-sex couples, because you have some sort of, religious or spiritual or some sort of other belief about that says, I'm not quite sure I want to, be for that, you vote for this. But I bet you, those people who would vote for it, if they knew all those harms it would do to women and children and seniors, and 90% of the people it's going to harm are going to be straight people, and that it actually takes away rights instead of expands rights, it does nothing to allow gay people to marry. That's the first point to get across to someone. May 9th will exactly be the same for same-sex marriage, up or down on this. What will happen is rights will be taken away. And most people you talk to, I bet, will say, I'm not for that at all. Talk to people. This says go talk to 50 people each, I think. Make it at least 10.
I had a lot of my neighbors without my sign, and I really didn't know how to explain it. Now I do. And
Yeah. I mean, and quick. I mean, those are quite a few talking points there. A quick talking point, especially if it's if it is an issue about same-sex marriage that people want to bring up, and that's quite all right. We don't have to agree on that in this discussion. It's not what this discussion about. Quick talking point. May 9th. Whether this thing passes or it's defeated, same-sex couples will not be marrying in North Carolina. It is illegal, and this does not address that. It will not change things come May 9th. What will be sad, and this is how I see it, what will be sad on May 9th is if you wake up and realize you voted for it, and then you learn about all the harmful things it did, then that's a good way to get people. Then what will you think? Because it's going to be too late to say, I should have voted the other way.
Or I should learn more about it.
Or I should have learned more about it.